couple of weeks ago, I asked people if they had any ideas or suggestions for videos and things that they wanted me to talk about. And one of the suggestions that I got was, hey, tell us what it's like to live in Montreal, about, the culture, the weather, the people, stuff like that. And, there's been a lot going on recently, so I haven't needed to kind of draw from that idea pile, if you will. But in the last 2 days, it snowed 70 centimeters, and today it's like minus 13, really windy. So there's no way in hell I'm going outside today. Plus, there's nothing really new to talk about. So, let's talk about what it's like to live in Montreal. And, well, honestly, the best way to summarize it would be it snowed 70 centimeters in 2 days. By the way, in case you're wondering, if you're not familiar with the metric system, that is 27 and a half inches in 2 days. That is a lot of snow. Now, obviously, it's not like that all year round, only sometimes in winter. But yeah, it's pretty intense. And by the way, if you want to see what that looks like, like 2 feet of snow in a couple of days, I posted a short video yesterday. You can find it in the short section of the channel. So if you kind of want to have it, it's like I think an 8-9 second video, something like that. So relatively short, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what it's like during that period after it snows a lot. Because, obviously we're in a city, it takes time for the city to clear away all the snow. So for a period after it, there's always kind of like, a day or two, depending on which area you are, where it's kind of like you're pretty much flooded with snow. So obviously that's part of it. That's part of living in Montreal or, Quebec, Canada in general. During the winter, there are periods where it snows a lot, where it's very cold. Snow this year so far hasn't been that bad, hasn't snowed that much, and there have been a few periods where it's been a little warmer, so it was able to kind of like melt a bit. So the accumulation of snow wasn't that bad this year until now. So yeah, that's kind of like part of it. That's the winter. When it comes to temperature, it varies obviously depending on the time of winter and everything. But I would say the average during the winter would be probably around like minus 10 to minus 20. Sometimes a little warmer, sometimes a little colder, like sometimes it drops to like, minus 25. Sometimes minus 30. It happens maybe a couple times per year, not that much. But it's still pretty cold. So a lot of the times in winter, people just end up, like staying home, going to work, like doing what they have to do, but they don't really go outside and do stuff. Unless, on those days where it is a little warmer, sometimes, you can go skiing or snowboarding during the weekend or, doing other winter activities. But like when it's minus 20 or minus 30, it's like no one feels like going outside. It's not fun. So that's kind of like what it's like in winter. And for someone like me going through what I'm going through, the fact that my body is very weak and the fact that it doesn't tolerate cold very well, I avoid going outside like the plague as much as I can. And that's why I'm very glad that I don't have a doctor's appointment today, because that would really, really, really suck. So anyway, I don't want to focus the entire video about what it's like in winter, because in summer it's completely different. In summer, the average would be like, low 20s. So I'd say between like 20, 25 degrees. Sometimes, it goes up to 30, sometimes 35 every once in a while, rarely, when there's a heat wave. But like, as you can see, there's extremes. Like sometimes it's like minus 30 in the winter and sometimes it's plus 30 in the summer. So there's a lot of range when it comes to the weather. And that's one of the advantages of not Montreal itself, but just Canada in general. Like a lot of countries, like Nicaragua, for for example, where my wife lives, it's hot all the time. You know, some periods of the year it's not quite as hot. Other periods of the year it is much hotter, but it's pretty much always hot. Whereas here there's a drastic difference between the winter and the summer, and because of that we have 4 very distinct seasons. So obviously we have winter where we freeze our ass off and there's snow all the time and people kind of get depressed because they can't go outside and, you know, see the sun as much. Plus, you know, the sun, there's just less light during the winter. So it's like a lot of the times you wake up in the morning, it's dark, you head to work, do your work, and by the time you come home, sun went down and it's dark again. So we spend a lot of the time in winter in darkness. And because of that, a lot of people have what we call seasonal depression, and they just end up kind of being depressed during the winter. So we try to maximize, you know, life outside of winter as much as we can. So then there's spring, where it starts to get warmer, you know, grass grows, flowers bloom, the leaves, you know, grow on trees and everything. It's like everything kind of comes back to life, and it's a very fun period, especially after going through winter. And then you have summer, which there's a nice period, but there's always a period where it just gets like way too hot and it's not pleasant being outside. So sometimes, you know, people stay inside, or we go like, you know, swimming lakes or rivers and stuff like that, go in pools, you know, find ways to cool down. And if you live in the country, then you have to deal with, you know, mosquitoes and black flies and deer flies and horse flies and all that crap. And of course they don't all come at the same time. It's like one, then the other, and then the other, and then the other. So pretty much if you live in the country, you're going to be dealing with flies and mosquitoes pretty much all summer long. So spring, end of spring, when it's warm but not too warm yet, and when the bugs haven't really come out that much, really fun time of year. And then at the end of the summer, like when fall starts, usually the insects kind of start to go away, and it's still warm enough that we can enjoy it. So it's kind of like winter, super cold, everyone's in hibernation mode. Spring, it's like, yeah, everything's coming back to life. Let's live again. Let's enjoy life. And then summer hits, and it's just like, it's really hot, and if you're in the country, there's bugs. So it's like, yeah, it's fun, but it could be better, you know? And then autumn, fall, whatever you want to call it, it's like, you know, leaves are changing colors, the temperature's still nice. If you live in the country, like, it's I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but walking in the country, like in the forest during fall, is amazing. Because first of all, there's all the colors of the trees, of the leaves changing colors and everything. There's like yellows and oranges and reds and everything. And then as the leaves start to fall, then there's that like crackling sound as you walk around and squish the leaves as you're walking around. So it's a very unique experience. Like, I know like a lot of people are in the US. If you're in the northern US, then you know what I'm talking about. You've experienced this before. But I know that people watch from a lot of different countries, so not everyone is necessarily familiar with that. In fact, there's a lot of countries where it's just like, there's flowers and trees and leaves and everything year round, like it's normal. Whereas here it's like, no, it's like everything at the end of fall, it just like dies, and then winter hits, and it's like everything's like dead for 3 months, and then in spring it starts coming back to life. So that's kind of like what it's like when it comes to seasons. Not specifically Montreal, but you know, Quebec in general, and also Canada in general. It varies a bit depending on the region, the province you live in. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you focus specifically on Montreal, well, just to kind of give you an idea, Montreal is an island, and there's kind of like 2 Montreals. There's Montreal City, and then there's the greater Montreal area. So Montreal City itself is entirely on an island. There's a little under 2 million people who live there. And then in the greater Montreal area, which includes like Laval on one side and then Longueuil on the other side, and a bunch of other small cities, there's a little over 4 million people, which, just to give you an idea, is almost half of the population of the entire province of Quebec. So most of the people are here. In fact, I remember back when it was COVID, in the beginning especially, of all the Canadian provinces, we were the one with the most COVID cases. So we were kind of like the bad guys, if you will. Like Quebec was the bad guy, like, province, if you will, of like, don't go there like during COVID. Like, you do not want to be there. And because Montreal is the biggest city in that province and second biggest city in the country, of course there were more cases there. So it's like, as a Montrealer, it's like, oh, well, we're the bad guys of Quebec. So it's like Quebec are the bad guys of Canada, and then Montrealers are the bad guys of Quebec. So it's like, we're double bad guys, during COVID, of course. In fact, we're the only province that got like curfews and stuff like that, which was not pleasant. I remember back then, when there was the first lockdown, first curfew, I was living in downtown Montreal, and it was just so weird because like starting 8 at night, no one is allowed outside. Unless you have a dog that you can walk. That's why a lot of people adopted dogs during COVID, and then after it was done, they were like, well, what do I do with the dog now? But anyway, point is, I was living downtown, and downtown, like in any city, there's always people, no matter the time of day. And then COVID hits, lockdowns come into effect, curfews and everything, and like boom, 8 o'clock at night, streets are deserted. And it was such a strange feeling to experience. But yeah, it was also kind of interesting at the same time. So anyway, that was just kind of a side story that I threw in there just because it reminded me of that. So yeah, pretty much half of the population of Quebec is located in the greater Montreal area. And then half of that population, so like 1/4, if you will, of the population of Quebec is located in the city, the island of Montreal itself. So a lot of people, and the thing is, around 60% of people who live in Montreal speak both English and French. So as a result of that, we have a much more varied, cultural background than a lot of other cities, because most people speak 2 languages. So immigrants, it's like, oh, well, if I speak French, of course I'm going to come to Montreal instead of another Canadian city, because most other cities speak mainly English. Plus, just because of the Quebec culture, I would say it's more, I don't know, it's more open-minded, I guess. It's more kind of like, I don't really know how to describe it, because I feel like English culture, I'm not talking about like English from Britain. I'm talking about like English speaking culture in general, like, US, Canada, stuff like that. It's a little more, or especially Canada, it's a little more kind of like proper in a way. More of like, less open of like, everyone does kind of like their own thing. And, yeah, we're polite to each other. We're Canadians. We don't really have a choice. But it's more like formal in a way, if you will. Whereas Quebec culture, we're just like, hey, yeah, cool, let's go have a beer, let's have fun, let's eat some poutine, let's just like, let's have a blast, So because of that, and because of the fact that, we speak English and French, there's a lot more immigrants that come here. So as a result of that, we have a lot of different ethnic backgrounds in Montreal. So obviously you have the Quebecers, which, either speak French or English or both. But we also have a lot of different other cultures. We have Hispanic cultures, Indian cultures. We have a lot of Asian from a lot of different countries. We have like people from everywhere, really. And depending on the neighborhood, it's kind of natural for people who immigrate to kind of seek out their own, if you will. So it's kind of like over time, different areas of the city It's like, oh, this is kind of like this is the Chinese, like it's Chinatown, and this is like, oh, it's like it's the Jewish neighborhood, and this is like this other thing and this other thing. So it's like depending on the region you live in, you get to experience a lot of different cultures. And if you move, then odds are you'll probably be exposed to another culture you're not necessarily familiar with. Plus, because of all those different cultures, there's a lot of different restaurants from different countries and stuff like that. So we get to experience a lot of different things as a result of that. Obviously, there's still the typical like Quebec restaurants that serve like, poutine and stuff like that. But it's nice to be able to live in a place with all those different cultures because it just makes for a much more open-minded kind of person, Whereas I would say the rest of Quebec is more like, French speakers, like less exposed to other cultures, more like, living their little life in their little corner of the world and that's it. And like they don't really care about other people. Not to say like they're not nice or anything. It's just because like that's what's unique about Montreal is all those different cultures kind of gathered together. And it's a really cool place to live. Like, yeah, it's a big city, second biggest one in Canada. But I still enjoy it because of all those, like, those variety in cultures and viewpoints and beliefs and everything else. Now, when it comes to geography, there's, the city's pretty much, as I mentioned, it's on an island and it's pretty much built around a mountain, Mount Royal. So Mount Royal itself is just like a big giant park. A lot of nature. I used to live nearby and I'd go run there and walk there all the time. I loved it so much. And there's a lot of parks in this city, very green city. There's a lot of trees in the streets and everything, which is nice, provides shade and, cools down the city a bit. It's just funny how it said provide shades and then the sun just vanishes behind a cloud and things suddenly like get darker. I just thought it was funny. So yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of like live in that culture. But I was saying about the geography, so it's kind of like near the center of the city, there's the mountain, and then everything's kind of like built around that. And then there's obviously different areas and everything. I currently live near the Olympic Stadium, which was built for the 1976 Olympics. And, it's nice to be able to see that because attached to the Olympic Stadium is the Montreal Tower, which is the tallest inclined tower in the world. And it's just like, 45-degree angle. And it's pretty impressive if you've never seen it. Like I live nearby during anytime that's not the winter pretty much. I go for walks in the park that's nearby, so I walk by it, like literally like a couple hundred meters away. And it's just always impressive to see that. So, as you can see, like any big city, there's a lot of different things, but it's a very unique city because of the culture difference. Like, most of Canada speaks English. Province of Quebec speaks mostly French with some English. There's a few other parts of Canada that also speak mainly French, but most of it is English. Whereas this province, it's really bilingual. Like by law, you need to have everything in English and in French. If you're a business and you do not have everything in English and in French, they can force you to do that. Otherwise, they can revoke your business license, which in a way is good because it exposes you to different cultures. In another way, it's bad because it just makes everything more complicated. Especially as an example, when it comes time to file taxes, we have to file federal taxes and then we have to file provincial taxes. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it is. And same thing when it comes to immigration. When it comes to immigration, I need to apply on the federal level, and then once I'm approved as a sponsor, then we can apply on the provincial level. So it makes everything longer and more complicated and more frustrating. When it comes to, as an example, employment insurance, once again, it's like, okay, well, how do I get that? Is it on the federal level or the provincial level? And it's like that in everything that has to do with the government. So it can be very frustrating at times. But in a way, it's like, yeah, okay, that's kind of the downside. But the upside of living in Quebec, especially Montreal, is what I was saying about like all these different cultures kind of like gathered together. So it's definitely a nice place to live, aside from the winter. But that's pretty much anywhere in Canada. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I need to talk about. I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Obviously, there's a lot more I could talk about, but we just came up on the 20-minute mark, and I don't want this video to last forever. I guess maybe just one more thing when it comes to cultures, not necessarily related to Montreal itself, just Quebec in general. We, as you know, we live in Canada, so obviously we're known for a couple things, one of which is maple syrup. So we have sugar shacks, which is where they make the maple syrup, and during the winter, a lot of those places have restaurants, and people go and eat, typical Quebec meals and stuff like that, such as some of them have poutine. They'd be like, baked beans, pea soup. Let's see what else. Well, obviously a bunch of desserts like maple desserts and sugar pies and stuff like that. And you basically go there and it's kind of like buffet style, eat as much as you want and just get super fat. So, most people kind of go like once per year. Some people go multiple times, some people don't go at all, but it's kind of like part of the culture here. And also a lot of those places have an apple orchard during the winter or the summer because, obviously maple, you can only do that, well, either in spring or in winter. Some do both, some do just one, it depends. But in order for the sap to be able to come out, you need to reach that kind of like temperature range where it melts during the winter, during the day, but then it freezes at night. So the sap goes up and down in the tree. And because it's moving in the tree, then when you poke a hole, the sap comes out. Otherwise, it's like you poke a hole, it's like, yeah, a couple drops come out, but that's about it. So it's like there's only really 2 periods where you can do it, usually during the spring, during the fall, right around that time I just described. So that's kind of like why winter's like, all right, winter is sugar shack season. And then during the rest of the year, obviously those places don't really have anything to do. So a lot of them just have like massive apple orchards, and you can go there and pick apples or buy apples or apple pies and apple product and stuff like that. So it's a nice experience. We kind of have like those 2 seasons of like during the winter, it's sugar shack season. And then during like, late summer, early fall, then it's the apple season where people go apple picking. So that's kind of like rituals that a lot of people who live in Quebec have. And it's nice. It's kind of like a cool part of the culture because I'm aware that a lot of other countries don't necessarily have things like that because their weather is constant. So it's just like, well, this is constantly available, Whereas us, a lot of the things are very limited. It's like, hey, if you want to do winter sports, you have 3 months during the year where you can do it. If you want to go swimming, well, you can only do it during the summer because the rest of the year is too cold. The water's too cold. If you want to pick apples, well, that's the season where the apples are ripe. If you want to go at a sugar shack, it's during winter. So it's like we have those very specific times of year. And because of that, we kind of try to maximize those as much as we can. Kind of like, the whole, if you remember, if you can remember me coughing, sorry. If you can remember a while back, and I was like, it's pumpkin pie season! That's why I was so excited, because it kind of comes around once a year, and because it's only there once a year, I want to enjoy it as much as I can. So there's a lot of those kind of like rituals that come from living in a place like this. So I think that covers most of it. We're at the almost 25-minute mark at this point, so don't want to keep going. I seem to be coughing a little more, so now would be a good time to stop. But I just kind of want to give you a glimpse into what it's like to live in Montreal and like, you know, Quebec in general as a province, and also Canada in general as a country. So definitely some downsides, but also a lot of upsides. Like, things aren't boring because of those constant changes, and especially in Montreal, because you get to be exposed to all those different cultures. So you're always learning something new. So it's definitely nice. And I think part of it, like part of my desire to travel came from that. From being exposed to those different cultures and be like, hey, it's cool to be exposed to that, but it's like, I want to go visit it. I want to be like, you know, completely like surrounded by that. I want to truly experience it. And that's what I was able to do a couple of years ago when I sold everything and traveled for 10 months. But it's still nice to be able to live here and kind of experience a little part of it. So yeah, that's pretty much what it's like to live in Montreal, to live in Canada. So thank you for watching. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. If you want to support me, to support this channel, you can just click on the link in the description of this channel. If you want to help me get this message out to more people, hopefully, you know, inspire them, motivate them, provide whatever value I provide to you, but just to other people, let me know if you have ideas of how I can do that in the comments, or if you know anyone with an audience who could, you know, help us get the message out, whatever that is, just let me know in the comments. And as usual, thank you so much for being a part of this community. I love you all so much and I appreciate you. Especially, I just read the video. So, just ran out of limit for the size of the video and it just cut it. I don't know if I'll be able to piece it back together when I publish it, or if I have to record a whole new video. I hope I don't have to start over because I was literally right at the end. And I don't want to have to spend another 27 minutes and 22 seconds re-explaining everything that I just explained. So anyway, hopefully I can piece it together. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And if I can't piece it together, well, I guess you'll never see this, so it doesn't matter what I say. So see you either in the second version of this video or in the next video, one or the other.